Man, do I love that intro. Brought to you by Built in Buffalo. Treating us great, on our first couple episodes here with the platform. This is Duane from Two Goalies, One Mike, bringing you episode 166, brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier market and tap room, with over 300 beers to choose from. The best place to go for all your happy hour needs. Go take in a Sabres game, a Bills game. Both teams don't say a winning streak, on a one-game winning streak each. Hopefully make it 2 tomorrow night, as we're joined here by Buffalo Sabres beat writer with the Buffalo News, Mike Harrington. Mike, how are you? It's been a minute since you've been on with us, and thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, no problem, Duane. You're right. One-game winning streaks. You got to roll with those in this town right now, right?
Don't call it a winning streak. And you know what? We as fans worked for it, didn't we? Like, there was you were in Prague, correct?
No, Lance Lisowski was in Prague.
Lance was in Prague. I apologize, but still, you saw just the angst, the anxiety, the stress over the first 2 games. Then the third one happens where you do everything you possibly kind of put the puck in the net, but you use that term, we got goalied. And to say the least, the stress levels were at an all-time high. There are some people even there calling for Lindy's job already.
Well, that's a little over the top. However, they had never started a season 0-4-0, ever. And no one essentially who starts a season 0-4-0 makes the playoffs. So it got real late, real early there. And if you ever want to see game 4 out of 82 be a crucial game, that was really it. They needed to win that game and get this thing turned around, because as I wrote the other day in the Buffalo News, this week's wide open for them. I mean, you're talking Pittsburgh, Columbus, Chicago. They're not going to be easy games, but they're all winnable games. I mean, to me, I want to see this team get 4 or 5 points out of these 6 and really get back in this season right now, because it's only 4 games in. They're 1-3. Probably should be 2-2. Certainly probably should have won that LA game. But if you have a good road trip here, you're right back in the mix. And, you can't win anything in October. You can lose a lot in October, and we don't want to see them chasing another season.
No, definitely not. And, we talked about that LA game. You talked about that LA game. Like, I was there. I mean, obviously you were too. And I mean, talk about a game where, I know you go through the analytics people and the deserve to win meter, and somehow in some worlds, the deserve to win meter in those games in Prague, one of those games were in favor of Buffalo, which I don't agree with at all. I think they got outplayed in both games. But the LA game was very deflating because they did put pressure on. Power play still looked atrocious, but still 5-on-5, they were the much better team, and they couldn't come out of that with a W. And, you think on a night where the vibes are so high, Lindy's back in the building, all these things to be happy about, and then to not come out of that game with a win with the way you played offensively, 5-on-5, just deflating. And, again, I was one of them. I wasn't calling for people to get fired. But I'm like, are we really going to go through this again for another season? Like, is this what's going to happen? Like,
well, the way I looked at it was the first 40 minutes of that game. That's how the Sabres want to play. That's how Lindy wants them to play. They got to put the puck in the net more. They got to fix the power play. But in terms of their attack style, their physicality, that's the game. The third period, they got away from it. They played it in all 3 periods against Florida. So you could really make the case they've played 5 out of the last 6 periods exactly the way Lindy wants them to play. The problem in LA, I mean, Darcy Kemper had a great game. They kind of got goalied a little. They didn't finish well. And then Darcy Kemper goes and gives up 8 goals against Ottawa on Monday.
Right.
So where was some of that on Thursday, right? It was a frustrating game for them. And I really think they hunkered down. They understood that they played well for 40 minutes. They made a couple bad mistakes in that third period. And we saw a much better performance against Florida. And I really think, even though that wasn't the real Panthers with Bobrovsky not there, with Barkov and Kachuk out, they played well enough to win that game. And now we see what they do on the road. But they have already established a style and an identity they want to play under Lindy Ruff. And they've hit it in 5 of the last 6 periods. And it's all about being consistent, which they were nothing but inconsistent last year.
Yeah, again, with those first 2 games in Prague, you saw just the slow starts in both games. Just very reminiscent of last season. And the one thing I'll say about after those first 2 games is this isn't something that's going to keep happening. Maybe,
No.
you know, not under Lindy Ruff. Like, granted, we don't have, it's not the old Lindy, the guy that you saw videos of him, losing it during practice and interviews. You covered the team during those early drought years.
Oh, yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, this is not that same guy, but I still think he wasn't that guy in Dallas. He wasn't that guy in Jersey. But I think when you put Lindy back behind this bench, behind a Sabres bench, he knows what this city means to him, what this team means to us. He is going to coach probably differently than what he was doing in Jersey and Dallas, just for those reasons, because he's finding a familiar fire from.
And he turned the heat up for that Florida game. I mean, by going 11-7, he went to 3 lines. He knew he had 3 days off. He really pushed hard to win that game. And I think in the rearview mirror, Duane, I think we're going to find that the games in Prague less offensive to us as the season goes on. Okay, first of all, it's pretty clear the New Jersey Devils are a darn good hockey team. Yes. And if Tom Fitzgerald had ever gotten Lindy Ruff a goalie, Lindy Ruff wouldn't have gotten fired last year.
Nope.
If he had Jacob Markstrom and Jake Allen, he'd still be the coach of the New Jersey Devils. That's the first thing. The other thing is, and I was uneasy about those 2 games. And here's why. The Sabres were sent, they had a 12-day trip. They went to Germany first. They had a 12-day trip, and days 11 and 12 were their 2 NHL games. That concerned me. That concerned me a lot. The New Jersey Devils did not have a 12-day trip. I really think in hindsight, the Sabres were sent to Germany because of J.J. Peterka and opening the building. I really think the New Jersey Devils should have been sent to Europe to finish training camp as well. It was not a very level playing field at all. And the Sabres coming off of Germany, off playing on the big ice, playing basically an East Coast League team, we're not ready for the New Jersey Devils speed at all. The Devils look great so far. You know what? And I think it was almost like the Sabres had to start the season over again. Now, you don't get a mulligan in those 4 points you lost. No, but they started the season over again against LA, and they have looked appreciably different, appreciably better, a much stronger pace of play than we saw in Prague.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And I want to bring up to point, one of the adjustments that he made in that Florida game. In his post-game press conference, he flat out said, I shortened the bench. I shortened the bench because I know we have time off, and I want to squeeze every ounce of gas out of these guys that I can. I want them to empty the tank, I think his exact words were. Because I've been calling for that for 3 years. Why weren't previous coaches shortening the bench? Why are we still rolling 4 lines? Why? And this isn't me taking shots at guys like Kyle Okposo or Gergen, but you have those guys sometimes out on the ice with a minute left. I'm like, that shouldn't be happening. That's where you want to give those extra couple minutes a game to Tage Thompson, to Alex Tuck, to Zach Benson, to fill in the blank, JJ Peterka, Rasmus Dahlin. These guys, I mean, it's not like these guys are in deep into their 30s or in their mid 30s. They're still young players. They still have a lot in the tank, even when they don't.
And you do have to watch the schedule. I mean, last year there were 12 back-to-backs, but here was a case where Ruff knew the schedule. He knew the desperation to get a win, and he knew he didn't have another game until Wednesday. So you're right. He took advantage of what he had schedule-wise and decided before the game he was going to go 11-7. He was going to sit out Sam Lafferty, who took a couple bad penalties. He was going to get that Dennis Gilbert in just in case the Florida Panthers decided to really be the Florida Panthers in that game and there was any problems. There weren't. And then he made sure his top guys played because he knew they didn't have to play again until Wednesday. And he needed to get a win. And like I say, Game 4 was awfully desperate for the Buffalo Sabres, and far more than most Game 4s are in any season.
Yeah, you would call it a must-win, right? It's just you can't go about as close to a Game 7 in a regular season. Can't go 0-4. I couldn't agree with you more. Again, I was at that game too. Just nerve-wracking. Just getting into that game. Just what was the score? They eventually made it 4-2, I believe it was, right? They made it 4-2. You
Yeah.
thought they might kind of claw back a little bit, but then Buffalo was able to pull back away. I mean, you're still playing the Florida Panthers, even without Barkov, even without Kachuk. That is still and this is my point too that I've made plenty of times, even in this offseason. To be a winning hockey team, a sustainable winning hockey team, you need 3 scoring lines at the very minimum in this league. Like, look at Florida. Granted, it's a little bit easier for them because there's no state tax and players are willing to take a little bit less than their market value, i.e. like Sam Reinhart, who I think would have made more anywhere else, but was willing to accept a little less because, he's not getting taxed. But like you look at your Edmonton Oilers, you look at, your other top dogs in the league. Look at the other teams in the past, the teams like Chicago when they were winning cups and Pittsburgh when they were winning cups. They had deep lineups where even if you did get your third line stuck out there at the end of a game, like there's still a good chance they might score because that is technically a scoring line. You look at the Sabres.
Black holes. That's what I look at. You can't have black holes in your lineup. You should be able to have 3 lines. You should be able to put your 4th line out there to give you energy. It goes all the way back, really, to the 2011 Boston Bruins, who had the prototype 4th line that didn't score a lot, including former Sabre Danny Paille. Didn't score a lot, but they were physical. They generated play. They swung momentum. And we've seen some of that now. The Sabres wanted to build that with the 4th line of acquisitions. Lafferty hasn't been real good. Abe Kubel, who I think will be very good, got hurt. Mallenstein has been pretty good and pretty physical, but Lindy sat Mallenstein mostly out of that game because, like you said, he went to 3 lines. He had to win. He had to have his scorers out there, and it worked. But they need to get their top guys going. And really one of the big takeaways from that game, without a goal, was the play of Dylan Cousins' line with Jack Quinn, with Yuri Kulig. They looked really good. They looked fast. They were generating chances. They have to finish. Dylan Cousins still doesn't have a goal yet. Kulik doesn't have a goal yet, that he's getting close. But if they continue to play at that pace and create those kind of chances, that line's going to score a lot of goals, and that's what the Sabres need to see.
Yeah, I've really liked what I've seen out of Yuri Kulik. And Lindy has been impressed too. Like, he's had a few good things to say about the guy. Dylan Cousins, I mean, you have to imagine he's going to get going soon because that's one player I looked at when the Lindy Ruff hire happened. It's like, I think a guy like Dylan Cousins is really going to thrive under a Lindy Ruff because that's a Lindy Ruff type player. Same thing with Zach Benson. He's a pest out there. His motor is always running, doesn't give up on plays. Like, those are 2 guys I would have, Paterka too, high hopes for under Lindy Ruff. I mean, Alex.
But how tight did things get when they lose that game to LA and Dylan Cousins went berserk? He snapped his stick on the boards. He threw the stick out. He did some interior decorating in the tunnel down from the bench toward the locker room. You don't normally see a guy do that on October 10th. So things had really already gotten nerve-wracking for these guys. And, he certainly channeled it the right way on Saturday. He played much better. Still didn't score, but geez, he's going to score if he keeps playing like that. But, I think Lindy Ruff knows what he can get already out of some of these guys. And, he wasn't throwing stuff against the wall when he said he liked this roster. I mean, when he coached the Devils and you would talk to him about the Sabres, he would routinely talk about Dahlin and Power and Cousins and Thompson. So when this came up, when Kevin Adams convinced him to take it, he knew a lot about the roster already and what he might want to do with it. So I think we're seeing the impact, and, the pace of practice today was really good at Harbor Center. And, we'll see how it goes on the road trip, because Pittsburgh's going to be a hornet's nest with Malkin looking for his 500th goal. So, that's going to be a bit of a crazy atmosphere. So we'll have to see off the hop on this road trip how they handle this.
Crosby looking for point number 1,600 too. I think he's one of he'll be on a list of what is it? One of
it's only 10. There's only 9. He would be number 10.
Yep. And that's could be a big milestone night. And I just don't want to be the team to give up any milestones, especially after coming away with such a big win. But talk about 2 careers, especially Crosby. Like, I don't know how many more years that guy has left in the tank, but like I could watch Sidney Crosby play till he's 50 years old. He's just,
Yeah, I mean, what did he sign for? 3? He signed for 3 more. I mean, so he's going to get to 40. But you're right. There's just been no real drop in his play at all. And he's just the conscious of the franchise. He's the heart and soul of the team. But, they're in transition. They're trying to middle it. The Penguins are trying to rebuild, retool, and continue with their stars to try to contend.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very difficult to do both of those things at the same time. But obviously, you're not going to go into a rebuild when you still have Crosby, Letang, and Malkin. So I wondered where Crosby's head was going to be, if he was going to say maybe it's time to move, if we're going to do a total rebuild here with Kyle Dubas. But I think they tried to tell him we are going to try to compete. And, I don't think the Penguins are a playoff team, but we'll have to see. I mean, the goaltending is a factor for them, and the depth is a factor, but it's always a joy to cover the Penguins and see these guys play. And it's certainly been a pleasure to watch them in their arena over the years. And the fan base is incredible. I was lucky enough to cover their 2 Stanley Cups when they beat San Jose and Nashville, and the atmosphere in Pittsburgh was unbelievable. And we'll see how the Sabres do it. It really makes for a fascinating game for the middle of October.
Any fun interactions with Crosby over the years? I mean, you've pretty much covered him almost his entire career. So
yeah, it was funny. I did a retrospective on the 10-year anniversary of the Winter Classic in 2008 at the Ralph, and I asked the Penguins in advance. When the Penguins were coming to town, I would really like to talk to Sid 5-10 minutes. If we can swing this, and it's tough to do on a game day or whatever. But the Penguins were gracious enough. They said, we should be able to make it happen. So they brought me in the locker room after a morning skate, and most everybody had cleared out. And the PR guy says, just hang on over here. And all of a sudden I turn around, and there comes Crosby. And, hey, how you doing? Yeah. Wow, 10 years already, And we talked about the Winter Classic for a good 10, 12 minutes, and it was great stuff that I ended up in the story. I had already talked to Ryan Miller when I was out in Anaheim, so I was able to tell Crosby, well, Ryan said this about the shootout. What do you think about that? And, and the thing of Crosby that stood out to me with Crosby was everyone playing in that game, and Crosby included himself, they thought it was a one-time deal. They thought it was going to be just a gimmick. And even the ice conditions were not good. They didn't know if they could continue. He said, none of us had any idea this would turn into one of the great traditions in the league. And we ended up playing in the first one. At the time, you didn't even know. I remember some of the Sabres telling me they came in the locker room and said, there's merchandise available. Merchandise for a regular season game? So it's turned into a big event. Yeah. So, but Crosby was really interesting to talk to about that. And, when you see him in the playoffs and you deal with him with the throngs of media around his locker, and he just sits there, he puts his Penguins baseball cap on and talks for 10 or 15 minutes, takes the heat off some of his teammates. It's really amazing to see.
Yeah. I not to get, the 20-year anniversary is, just a couple years away, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. They'll be in the new stadium. I know the Sabres want to host.
Has to be.
It has to be the 20, right? Especially, I think that would be the final year of Crosby's contract, if I'm not mistaken.
I mean, it has to
imagine?
Be.
Could you imagine? Can we reenact that shootout shot one more time? Get Ryan on the pads.
The 2028 Winter Classic, it can't possibly be anything but Pittsburgh at Buffalo in the new Highmark Stadium.
I agree. I couldn't agree more. I remember I slept out when those tickets were announced that they were going on sale. Me and the girl I was dating at the time, we slept out at the field house. We stayed the night out at the field house with her cousin, and it was a big party. Just a big party. People were finding like the metal garbage barrels. They're starting fires in the metal garbage barrels. The lead paint it stunk to all high hell. Like it was bad, but it was so much fun. So much fun and a great time. And even though they lost, which sucked, but I'll never forget that experience, man. It was a fantastic time, and really like being in a snow globe.
No one will forget that because of the fact that it was almost like a football game. It was tailgating. It was a Bills atmosphere almost in a hockey game, and no one had ever seen that before.
Nobody. I love looking down memory lane. I just can't wait until Buffalo gets it. I went to the one in New York City too against the Rangers, and it just wasn't nearly the same.
It was freezing.
Yeah, oh my God, yeah. I envied the fans that were on the side with the sun. I was
Yes.
miserable where I was sitting.
Mhm.
But yeah, so speaking of Crosby was the captain, we now go to the Sabres captain. Him and Peyton Krebs got into it at practice, and I know you weren't at that practice, correct? You weren't there to see
I
it.
was I was on a scheduled day off, so I was not at that practice for
Not,
full disclosure. Yes.
yeah, so we're gonna bring that up right here. The tweet in for those of you who haven't seen it, Sarah Holland tweeted this out of what led to the fight itself. It was, from what we understood through Lindy, there was a play in a drill before where I think Krebs got a stick up on Dahlin, and Dahlin threw a brutal hip check on Krebs, who I'm assuming wasn't expecting that. Maybe that in particular, maybe a response of some sort, maybe not that. But your thoughts on that, because when's the last time we talked about a fight during Sabres practice? I know a lot of the back in the day, a lot of the away practices weren't covered. Who knows what happens when they're not on home ice, but like, when's the last time this happened? Or you seen any type of this kind of fire
Well,
during a practice? Like,
I saw the Justin Falk and Vander Kane dust up, but that was more of a screaming match. That wasn't a fight. I've seen little things here and there, nothing to this extent, but you know what? I love all the aggregators in Canada jumping on this, going, Sabres dysfunction. Are you kidding me? What a bunch of garbage. This is good. This is
I agree.
The only bad thing about this was I'm sure they weren't happy with Dahlin going low with a hip check. You know what?
Oh, yeah.
But you know what? Even Dahlin said that was a little excessive. But Lindy Ruff had to be smirking to himself through this whole thing. Is this good or bad? Good Lord. All we heard about for the last year is this team is so soft. This team doesn't practice hard. This team doesn't work hard. So now the guys are showing fire in games. They're showing fire and brimstone in practice. And this is bad? How is this bad? This happens more than people understand, more than people know. It just doesn't get covered to this effect. And this wouldn't be this big maelstrom were it not for that video in existence. She was the only one who was there for a TV station filming practice. If she doesn't have that video, there's none of this Canadian firestorm of media. Oh, Buffalo dysfunction. It's a bunch of garbage. There's no problem with it. Guys are laughing about it, and the coaches love it. Do you want a little fire and brimstone out of your team or not?
I agree. How can you not want that? I wouldn't even call it my problem with it. The only thing, I'm just grateful nobody got hurt, obviously. And B, not that I don't think Peyton Krebs is an important player, but thank goodness it wasn't a more prominent player in your lineup, and it could have led to an injury. But both those things didn't happen. So I'm all for it. I'm all for, something to fire this team up. Just bring the passion out. And to how this conversation began, it's been since Evander Kane and Justin Falk that we've seen anything like this in a practice. And
that's 8 years ago.
Laughed it off.
Right. Yeah. And we were outside the locker room today, Duane, and multiple players, as they're coming back from Harbor Center, we're standing outside the locker room. They're going in the locker room. Multiple players saw us there and we're laughing. Go, hey, guys, no fights to write about today. Oh, you guys got nothing to write about today. How boring is this going to be? They were laughing about it.
Yeah,
it's not a big deal. I'm sure Dahlin and Krebs were laughing after Dahlin apologized, which he did. I'm sure Dahlin and Krebs were laughing about. Obviously, they were joking about it. Krebs joked about it on Instagram 2 hours after practice yesterday. So
yes, he did.
It's fine. You know what? Do you want your team to have a little passion and a little burr or not? And I think they're finding that now. Lindy Ruff's building that. And what was the ultimate thing in all this? What was Lindy Ruff's reaction? Did he stand at the podium and say, well, you'd really prefer your captain not to do that, and it's a problem of an injury, like all these Canadian aggregators said? No, what did Lindy Ruff say? He chuckled and said, boys will be boys.
Boys will be boys, exactly.
I don't think it's
and like this could be like a turning point. You don't know. Like this could be a something that brings these guys together. Like you said, they were joking about it after the fact, and they they sat there and Krebs posted on his Instagram and this, that, and the other. But at the end of the day, like, it's laughed off. And like you said, the Canadian media, they made something, a mountain out of a molehill, but it's something that could possibly bring this team together.
And if the Habs or Ottawa or the Leafs had done it, it'd have been a great thing. Oh, but it's Buffalo, so it's terrible.
Yeah.
More dysfunction. It's a bunch of garbage.
I agree. Yeah. So my next question to you is, obviously, it's UPL's net, but after a game like that from Devin Levi, knowing Lindy's past, like, he's not afraid to ride the winning goaltender, the hot goaltender. Do you think he goes right back to UPL, or do you think he goes to UPL, or he goes right back to Levi?
I think with 3 days off, with this being a back-to-back, I think he just goes back to UPL. I think Levi plays in Columbus. I think right now Lindy has full faith in both of these guys, and they've played 4 games. I count one iffy goal. UPL did one of those little swim moves in Prague. It cost them a goal. It's the only iffy goal the goalies are giving up in 4 games. So I think they have full confidence in both guys. I think they're going to split these two in the back-to-back, and then we'll see who plays in Chicago. But I think UPL will play tomorrow, and we'll see Levi in Columbus.
Yeah, speaking of Columbus too, I know you tweeted on it. Just such a really touching tribute tonight to the Gaudreau brothers.
Everything that the Blue Jackets have done since this horrible situation happened has been first class. Everything has been about the memory of Johnny and Matthew Gaudreau and about paying tribute to his family. I'm really looking forward to getting there Thursday and checking out the memorial they've erected in the concourse, checking out the mural outside the building. But to do what they did before their home opener Tuesday night and raise a banner and bring the family on the ice, to have the missing left winger at the opening face-off in the 13-second runoff. It was reminiscent of what we saw in the wake of the death of Kobe Bryant,
Yep.
where they would run the 24 seconds. Yeah. So, I mean, just spectacular stuff and just a horrible situation. But, you find some levity in tragedy too. And, what have the Blue Jackets done, Duane? They're winning. Their post-game team gathering when they win used to be a revolutionary army symbol. Well, now it's a donkey hat. And why is it a donkey hat? Johnny Gaudreau used to call everybody donkey. So in honor of Johnny Gaudreau, they're going to have a donkey hat for each game they win this year. And the player of the game will get that in the dressing room. And the first winner of the donkey hat, very fittingly, was Sean Monahan, Johnny Gaudreau's close friend, who had signed to play with him in Columbus this year.
Yeah, the whole reason he came to Columbus was to play with Johnny. One of the biggest reasons. So yeah, unfortunately, it's still not something that, like, you really get past. Like, as you can see with our logo, we still are honoring Johnny. My plan was to honor him through when they did this tonight, because it just felt right. And what was the player's name? The player in Europe that had his throat, his carotid artery. I forget his name.
Adam Johnson.
Adam Johnson. Yes. Having that happen barely a year ago, and then now this, just complete tragedy. And you see the hockey world come together. It's a beautiful thing, man. It doesn't matter what team you represent, who you root for, who your rival is. To see the league come together, and just at every single arena, including in Buffalo, honor Johnny Gaudreau. Just a really, truly beautiful thing.
And what did the Florida Panthers do tonight? The Florida Panthers also wore the number 13 jerseys in the warm-up, and each player walked into Nationwide Arena carrying purple Gatorade and a bag of Skittles, which are 2 of Johnny Gaudreau's favorite things in the world. It's just another way to honor Johnny Gaudreau. Apparently an idea that was brought up by his close friend Matthew Tkachuk, who was not there tonight. He's home ill and missed this road trip. But what a great idea by the Panthers as well.
Yeah, and Matthew had a really touching message, that he put out, like a statement in regards to how he wished he could be there tonight, but unfortunately, due to an illness, right? Like,
he's been ill.
Unfortunately, he couldn't be there, but I mean, he had some really touching words to say, in terms of Johnny and Matthew and their kids and the family. Just tragic, but it's just, I'm really happy that they were able to put together just like a touching presentation for the Gaudreau brothers. So what is different about this team under Lindy compared to Granato? Because, the narrative was last season when the whole practice thing came up that, the practices are fine. Like they get pushed hard enough. And then, you have the middle stack comments, which may have been taken out of context
Which
a
were,
little bit. Yeah.
which were,
like, yeah. So obviously thinner air up there. So like they're going to be dogging it a little bit more in practice when you're not used to breathing that thin air. But what is different about this team, this roster, and this core that we had last year now under Ruff? What is the difference between Ruff and Granato that you
well,
see?
there's some new personnel. Okay. So that's going to help. A guy like Malenstein helps. Greenway's playing a much more physical game under Ruff. He's thriving under Ruff. He's also healthy. I don't think he was healthy a lot of the time last year. But I think under Ruff, everyone's used the term. You've heard it from Kevin Adams. You've heard it from the players. They call it non-negotiables. You make mistakes under Ruff, you're going to pay. You're going to pay in ice time, or you're going to be sitting somewhere near me having popcorn in the press box. Sam Lafferty, offensive zone penalties, press box popcorn. Matthias Samuelsson, probably very close to press box popcorn.
Yeah, he got pretty close.
And I think he understood that, and Ruff went 11-7. And one reason I think he went 11-7, obviously, was to play some of his top four lines. The other thing was he was able to shelter Samuelsson some of the minutes. He didn't have to run Samuelsson out there 20 minutes because the guy is still trying to get under his feet. Lance Lysowski did a story today. He talked to him. The guy is still coming back from shoulder surgery and said he may have underestimated how difficult that was going to be. But mistakes are not going to be honored. The one thing we do hear a lot in practice, and practices, the Granato practice thing became a thing from people who weren't at practice, which was bothersome to me. I think it's a little overrated. Details are the difference in practice. They practiced hard enough under Granato. It's garbage that they didn't. They didn't worry about details. Ruff was yelling at them today, don't go offside. That's what I want to see in practice. I want to see details. I want to see them do the drills properly. Don't go offside. If there's a bad pass, Ruff goes, do it again. And they go back the other way and start over if a guy puts a puck in somebody's feet. That's where the difference was with some of Granato's practices. Granato lost the details and enforcing the details in practice. When they would do the drills right, the drills were fine. They were at good speed. They had good pace. It became a big overrated point. The details is where they lacked in practice, and that's the difference we're seeing.
Yeah, attention to detail, that's definitely a big thing, and we've literally beaten the accountability horse dead. It's dead. But finally It's here, and I've been begging for it for 2 years. And I'm not even a guy who needs a guy to be in the press box. Like, as a guy who's played, I've always felt accountability is in the moment.
And Ruff called Samuelsson out in the moment.
Yeah.
Did Granato ever call anybody out? Granato made excuses for guys.
No.
Everybody was okay. Everybody was okay when there were times Granato should have shredded somebody, and he just wouldn't do it. And here we are, the third game of the season, the first game at home, and Samuelsson takes a terrible penalty to put them down 5-on-3 with 2 minutes to go, and Ruff shredded him. And Ruff shredded him the next morning in the video session too. So that's a way that players get the accountability they demanded in those end of season press conferences.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree. In the post game, obviously it was a different situation at the end of the game, but I remember the one time I felt Granato came anything close to a semblance of accountability was that time where he sat Thompson for a period last year.
He did.
And he scored 2 goals.
Yeah, no, he did drop Thompson down. We've seen this already this year. Ruff's already sat Benson down. Now, he did say some of that was injury related. He didn't think Benson looked real well still in the ankle problem. But Benson's had a couple turnovers too. And I think Ruff was kind of, trying to get him to calm down a little. So we're going to see that more. And, I've told people who have not covered Ruff in the media This guy was a serial line flipper in his first stint here. We haven't seen that much yet around here yet. He's been pretty consistent with these lines since mid-September, but boy, back in the 2000s and 2010s, you had to take the lines down every single day because you didn't know who was going to be with who at practice, who was going to be who at the games from one period to the next. Now, maybe that's not always a good thing, but he wasn't afraid to do it. And I don't think he'll be afraid to do it again if he sees the need. If he wants to flip things around, he will. So we'll see how it goes. But I mean, I think people who did not cover Ruff, and certainly the players didn't play for Ruff, are still learning about Ruff. And it's interesting to see. Some of the fans remember, and there's a lot of new fans, who didn't remember a lot about Ruff. It is 11 years. The glory days are 17 and 18 years ago when some people weren't even alive. So people are learning.
Yeah, and like when you think about Lindy Ruff, you're telling people Lindy Ruff, well, what's one of the first things? Oh, him and Brian Murray in the Ottawa brawl. They don't there's so much more to that guy than just the Ottawa brawl. And people some people don't even know. Lindy wasn't even the one who sent them out. Andrew Peters has gone on record. He's we put ourselves out there. Lindy didn't have to tell us. We went out there ourselves.
Peters and Mayer did it themselves, so Coletta had to go out with them. Yeah, Lindy didn't send guys over the boards. They just took care of business.
Yep. Yeah. I don't think you'll ever get that level of Lindy Ruff again. You're ready to jump over on the other bench trying to, fight a coach. But yeah, man, that's just the accountability and just having your players' backs, willing to jump onto another team's bench to have a player's back, your captain's back. I think that was easily the biggest addition this team made in the offseason was behind their bench. And I think it's going to have this massive ripple effect, especially with that top six, which hopefully can stay healthy because, again, something I've harped on quite a bit is the variables you're relying on, the health of your players and regression or progression, not regression. Those are big variables. And we've already seen Paterka go down and, luckily it's nothing too serious. Just concussions are serious, but, he looks hopefully back in the lineup tomorrow. But, the power play. Yes.
Power play. To me, they people forget they were in the top 15 in the league last year in 5-on-5. They fell off 7 points in the standings. They fell off mostly because of their power play, going from third in the league to 26th or whatever it was. So to me, and now you're still 0 for 13 in the power play. So you still haven't fixed it. Seth Appert hasn't fixed it yet. They've got to get that taken care of because 5-on-5, this team looks pretty good. Certainly the last two games, this team was immeasurably better than the two opponents they played at 5-on-5.
Yeah. Hear from Chris Babel. If they're playing well, the results will come. To your point, when the power play starts clicking finally and they get that first one, they start going in, I genuinely believe, and that's where Thompson's going to be huge for them. I think Kulik too, if he gets more involved on the power play. Both have just lethal shots. A Dmitry Kalinin name drop here. Of course, only in a Lindy Ruff coach hockey team do we have to hear about Dmitry Kalinin again. Who will be in Lindy's stop first if he's not afraid to call players and make them pay for his i.e. Dmitry Kalinin.
And Matthias Samuelsson almost got the Dmitry Kalinin memorial treatment there too.
Oh my God. Yeah. But yeah, just wrapping things up here. I know you got some stuff to get to, and I appreciate the time you're giving us here. Just the matchup between Buffalo and Pittsburgh tomorrow. Obviously a much older Pittsburgh team. They made some additions, but virtually a very winnable game. Big milestone night. Do you foresee them fixing these power play problems tomorrow, or is this going to be really kind of a tough, grinded out game like you saw maybe against LA? Where the chances are there, but
they've had a lot of success against Pittsburgh lately, especially in Pittsburgh for whatever reason. And the Penguins, for all their Hall of Fame players, have been terrible on the power play for the last couple of years. So they've had a similar problem as the Sabres. The Penguins' goaltending is an issue. We have to see how consistent they're going to be there. The defense is not what it was. You're still looking at age catching up on Letang. Carlson's been hurt. I think the Sabres certainly have a good chance to get 2 points out of this game. But to me, every night is about pace. This is what Lindy Ruff wants. He wants this game played with pace. He doesn't want the doldrums of the first period that we saw too often last year. He needs this game played at a certain level. He needs guys hitting, and he needs just more shots, more quality shots go to the net. Where did Jordan Greenway score his goal the other day?
Beautiful goal. Beautiful goal,
man.
I love that.
Low, right between the dots, right to the crease. That's where you got to go. This perimeter stuff doesn't work. Now, Thompson got a nice break on that shot he fired through Spencer Knight, which was, one of those shots that a goalie's got to stop, and the Sabres finally got a break. But get to the net is the key point.
I agree. Like, those are, like that's a Lindy Ruff coach team. Just not afraid to get to those dirty areas, not afraid to take a beating, and not even just in the offensive zone, in front of your own net. And this is where I think a guy like Owen Power is going to benefit most from a Lindy Ruff, because how many times did we criticize guy Power last year for just being on almost like an island on it by himself in front of his own net, just not aware of who's around him, not going out there and being Chris Pronger, but like just utilizing the fact that you are bigger than everybody else and you can enforce your will. And I think the first time we see that in a game where Owen, has that lapse of awareness might be the last time, because I can't see Lindy allowing some stuff like that to happen in front of his own goaltender.
No, and Owen Power has been very good so far this season. Good. You can make the case he's been their best defenseman almost so far this season, with Dahlin trying to get back off that injury. There are guys who've had major impact from Ruff already. Power's one of them. Greenway's clearly one of them. A lot of guys are just happy that Ruff is here. The accountability factors was very important to guys like Thompson and Cousins. And we know Alex Tuck grew up with Lindy Ruff. So we know he's certainly happy to see Ruff behind the bench. So it's a big factor. Normally a coaching change gets you a little boost, but I think here it's a major point. Like the players felt they were lacking in that area. And here's the biggest factor, Duane. If you had hired Berube or Gerard Gallant or anybody else who was out there, they wouldn't have the cachet with the fan base. No. The fan base has lost all faith in this team and in this franchise. The fan base now has something to ride on, has something to trust, someone to trust. It is in Lindy we trust. Maybe we don't trust the players. Maybe we don't trust the GM. Maybe we don't trust ownership, but the fans now trust the coach. And when was the last time we could say around here the fans trust the coach?
Maybe
it might be Lindy Ruff.
Yeah, I think maybe we were we were conned into Ralph Kruger with
You were conned into Kruger for a little bit.
Conned into Kruger for a minute. Yeah, he said all the right things, right?
The Ted Nolan part 2, everybody knew was a tank, so you couldn't trust him because he had no control over anything. It's really the last time since Lindy Ruff was the coach that the fans believe the team is being properly coached.
Yes, I agree. Do you see a future for him in the front office when his coaching days are over?
I don't know. I think that's going to be up to him. I mean, he only signed a 2-year contract. It's October 15th, Game 5 coming of year 1. So let's just let things play out.
Yeah, I agree. Mike, always a pleasure having you on, man. You always come with some great takes, and always, again, I appreciate your time. Obviously you have a lot to do, deadlines to meet out there in Pittsburgh, heading into tomorrow night. So again, thank you.
All right, Duane, take care. Appreciate it.
As everybody, this has been episode 166. Two Goalies, One Mike, brought to you by Fatty Beer Company, Western New York's premier market and tap room, and of course, Buffalo Go Apparel. Make sure you go check them out at Buffalo Go Co on Instagram and Twitter, at Fatty Beer on Instagram and Twitter. I am Duane from Two Goalies, One Mike. Again, great interview with Mike Harrington, and we will see you tomorrow night after the Sabres take on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Hopefully, we're talking about a 2-game winning streak. Don't call it a winning streak, right? So you guys have a great night, and we'll talk to you later. Go Sabres.